If your voice agent books home visits, then it's probably broken even if it works perfectly in a demo, because the fastest way to fail is to book appointments into unverified addresses. In this video, I'm showing you a 5-step guardrail system that you can drag and drop into your Vapi and NA10 voice agents that's perfect for any home service business, like plumbing, HVAC, roofing, and so on, that's going to prevent you booking appointments into addresses that don't exist or that are outside of the service area. So the reality is that in the real world, in production, voice agents fail for two main reasons when we're talking about home service businesses. So we're talking about businesses where the first step is booking into a home visit. So for example, a plumbing business, someone calls up, they have a problem. We then qualify that lead to make sure that we're in the service area and that we can help them. And then the next step is to book a home visit where someone actually goes out to their home. And so in the real world, in production, what can happen is the voice agent can take in an address that maybe doesn't exist or it's slightly wrong, and that's going to cause a whole host of issues. It could also potentially be booking in jobs that are outside of the business's service area, which can lead to problems as well. And that can lead to sales reps driving out to addresses that don't even exist or that are wrong. It's going to lead to unhappy customers. They're going to be expecting a home visit and then no one's turned up. And just overall messy operations, and it's going to lead to so many issues. So like I say, one wrong digit in the transcription of the voice agent can lead to all of these problems. So if the caller is speaking too fast or they're mumbling, it's unclear, and the voice agent transcribes that incorrectly, it could lead to this issue. And then another issue is it could potentially be booking into appointments that are outside of the service area if we're not checking that. And that can also lead to chaos, because you can imagine you're booking in appointments for a business, and then the appointments are actually way outside of the service area and they can't even get to that customer. It's going to lead to cancellations, it's going to lead to frustrated customers and frustrated business owners. So what does this 5-step guardrail module look like? Well, the first step is we need to capture the address, obviously, but then we want to normalize it and make sure that it's correct. So we want to basically take the messy transcription and clean it up into a nice standardized format. We then want to validate it, so we would do that with an API call, which I'm going to show you how to set up later. Then we want to confirm with the customer just to make sure that we've got the correct address. And then once they confirm it, then we need another step to just double make sure that we're actually within the service area and that we can get to that customer. So we're going to be building a system that does all of that behind the scenes, but the caller is not going to notice any of that happening. It's going to be really smooth. So a normal conversation would be, what's the address for the property? The customer's going to respond, yeah, it's 24 Maple Drive. I think that's in Springfield. The agent's going to take that information, clean it up, validate the address, all within milliseconds, and it's going to reply, so just to confirm, I've got here 24 Maple Drive, Springfield, is that correct? The customer would then confirm that, and then we're going to, again, behind the scenes, check that that's in the service area, and then if it is, we'll just say, perfect, you're within the service area, let's get you booked in. So the customer experience is really smooth, and yet behind the scenes, there's a lot going on to make sure that the address is correct and that it's within the service area. So I'm going to give you a template that you can copy and paste into your existing voice agent system that's going to fit for any home service business. This is super important. It's going to be really clean output, and it's going to seamlessly integrate into any systems that you have in place already. So let's jump into NA10 straight away. Okay, so in the description, you can get the NA10 code for this, and you can just upload it straight into your workflow, and it's going to look like this. Okay, so I'm just going to walk you through exactly what we're doing, how it works, and then I'll show you how to set it up with Vapi later. So we've obviously got the webhook, and then we've got this code node just to build context. So what this is doing is basically just taking the data from the webhook and putting it into a code node. So the reason I'm doing this is because with the NA10 update in 2.0, we can no longer use code nodes and drag the data directly from the webhook because they've updated their security, basically not allowing that anymore. So we're just basically taking the webhook data and we're plugging it into a code node, and then we can reference that code node later. So you don't need to touch anything here, but it's just so you know. Now, in this variables box, I need to explain how this works, because when you're checking service area, there's a few different ways a company might do that. So they could either have a list of cities that they service, they might have a list of zip codes or postcodes, or they might use like a service area radius. So they're based in a certain location and they might service, let's say, 25 miles around that area. And we need to be prepared for any of those scenarios if we're selling these voice agents to those companies. So the way I've set this up is through a variables node. and we've got the 3 different options here. So we've got the city list, so if they've got a list of cities that they service, a zip code list, or whether they're using a service area radius. Okay, so the way you would set this up is if you were selling this to a client, let's say they're using a list of cities, what you would do is you would change the city list to true, and you'd make sure the other options are false. And that way, code nodes later on are going to know which matching system we're using. Then if you copy paste this to another client and they have a service area, all you'd have to do is come in and you would change this to false, you would change the radius to true, and now it's set up to be able to calculate the service area, okay? And you'll see exactly how that works. I want to show you that in a demo later on, okay? Then we've got some other variables to set up, okay? So we've got a module for the state that they're in, if it's in the US. If we're using the city list matching system, then you would paste in the list of cities, okay? Same with the zip code here, the same idea. We don't need to worry about the match style too much. And then if we're using the service area, then what we would need to do is figure out the latitude and the longitude of where they're based and where the center of the service area is from. And then we'd plug it into these 2 variable slots here. So the latitude here and the longitude here. So all you would do, if we go to maps, I'll just show you. So let's say that you're a plumbing business based in Salt Lake City, Utah. So I've just gone on Google Maps here. I'm just going to select a random one. Okay. So all you would do is you would take the address and you would just need to basically figure out the longitude and latitude. So you could do this by, I literally just searched in longitude and latitude finder on Google. Okay. You can just paste in the address and you can see we've got the latitude and longitude here. And then you would come back into this variables node and you would just plug those numbers in. Okay, nice and straightforward. And then the last one again is for service area. We're just defining the radius, so in miles. So in this case, I've just put 25. Okay, so you'd make sure that those are set up correctly depending on the business and how they determine their service area. Then we have just the standard route by tool name node here. So this is just to demonstrate that you would have this in conjunction with your other tools like checking availability, booking appointments into calendar, and so on. And you have these as 2 separate tools. Okay. So the first branch here is validating the address. So what we're doing is we're asking the customer for the address. We're then putting it through a code node, which is basically just cleaning up the data, putting it into a standardized form. We then have an HTTP request to an address validation step via Google, where it's basically plugging in the address into this step and it's making sure that it exists and it's giving us the full address. We then put this through another code node just to make sure that it's valid. And then we're going to use a data table here just for the coordinates. I'll explain a bit more about that in just a second. And then we've got the respond to webhook node where we're just letting the agent know, hey, we found this address, it seems to be valid. Can you just confirm it with the customer? Or alternatively, if it comes back as not valid, we might just need to double check and confirm with the customer and then run the step again. Now, the reason I have this data table is for the coordinates. So if the business is using a service area radius, then we need to basically check the coordinates of the address that the customer has given us. And we need to keep hold of those coordinates for the next step. But obviously you can see these are 2 separate workflows. And so between the different webhook calls, we don't retain that data, and we need the data to then check the service area later. And so this doesn't have to be a data table. It could be a Google Sheets, for example, but basically just any external source where we can just plug in the coordinates and then reference them in the second step. I hope that makes sense. But that's what we're doing here. Then we would confirm it with the customer. Let's say they confirm, yes, that's my address, that's correct. Then we have the check service area branch, okay? So in this case, we're either taking the coordinates if it's a service area, or we're plugging in the address if it's a city list. And then we're basically running it through this code node just to see if it's in our service area, which we've configured. And then we're plugging it back to the voice agent so that it can carry on with the rest of the call and getting them booked in. So to get this set up, you would firstly go into the variable nodes and set them up how I showed you in the beginning. You would then need to just set the HTTP request to the address validation, and I'm just going to show you how to do that quickly. So in order to do this, you need to go into Google Cloud Console, which is where we're going to set up the API key for the address validation. Okay. So what you would do is you'd come into this sidebar here. You'd come into Marketplace. Then you're going to search up for address validation API. And you can see it's the first one that comes up here. So you'd click on this. And then, so I've got this enabled already, but there would be a button here saying enable. So you would click on that, make sure it's enabled. Once you've done that, you're going to come back to the home page and you're going to search in for credentials. Okay. And you're going to click on this one. So this is where we have all of the API keys and our credentials set up. Okay. You would come in here and you would basically create a credential and you'd create an OAuth client ID. So after this point, you would create your API key for Google Maps, okay? And then you're going to basically get this API key. So you click on show key. Once you've created it, you're going to copy this. And then this is what we're going to paste into our credential. So you'd come into here, you can leave this URL as it is, okay? You'd make sure this is generic credential type, and then you would create a new credential. So make sure it's header auth. Now you can name this whatever you want, but you basically create the name and then you'd paste the API key into the values slot here. And then you'd save this and then you've got the credential all set up. Now the rest you don't need to worry about. You just need to get the address validation API key and plug it into this node like we've just done here. Then the last step that you need to configure is just this data table step here. So I'll show you how to do that. So you're going to come into your NA10 dashboard, you're going to come over to data tables and you'd create a new data table. So once you've created a new table, you just need to make sure it has these 3 columns. So we've got latitude as a number, longitude as a number, and then chat ID as a string. Okay, technically we're using call ID, but I've just named it chat ID. Okay, so once you've done that, you're going to come back into the workflow and you're going to come back into the upsert address coordinates node here. And you're just going to make sure that we've got the correct data table linked to this basically. Okay, so you're just going to make sure that that is all done. And then the last thing is you just want to make sure this is taking from the correct data table as well. Okay. And so once that's all set up, you're pretty much good to go. We just need to link it to our Vapi and then set up the prompt so it does the correct order. So I'm going to give you the prompt and I'm going to show you how to set it up in Vapi as well. So we're going to come to the webhook and we're going to go to production URL. We're going to copy this. We're going to come back to our Vapi dashboard and we will set up a new assistant. Okay. Now I've got this prompt here that I've taken from one of my other agents that I've been using. So you can take this from the description and copy paste this in, and obviously you would want to integrate this with the other parts of your kind of call flow, including booking and so on. But this is just for the address validation and checking the service area step. Okay, this prompt. So it's pretty robust. So it's got kind of fallbacks just in case there are any issues. Okay, but you can copy paste that prompt in. Then we just need to link it to NA10. So we're going to come over to the bottom here where it says messaging. And we're going to paste in that production URL that we copied over from NA10. Make sure that's saved. I'm just going to leave this no authentication just for the sake of this video. Now we need to create the 2 tools that we've set up in NA10. So you're going to come over to tools and you're going to create 2 new tools. Okay, I'm just going to show them here. So the first one you're going to name validate address. Okay, and then you're going to paste in this code, which is down in the description. You're then going to create one called check service area. And again, you're going to paste the code that is down in the description for this. Okay, then that's it. So that should all be set up. You'd go back to your assistant, come over to tools, and just make sure that your assistant has access to those 2 tools that we've just set up. Okay, and then after that, that's pretty much everything good to go. So let's actually test this out, and we're going to do the 3 different variations just to show that they all work. Okay, I've set up the prompt in a way where it's just going to straight away ask me for my address. So obviously in real life, you'd have this integrated into a more robust system, but just for the purposes of showing you the specific tool, I've just set it up that way. So the first thing we're going to test is the service area radius. So I've set these other 2 to false, I've set this one to true, and then I've got the latitude and longitude of a company based in Utah, and then I've just selected this random address that is close by just so we can see it working. Okay, so let's give this a test.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi there. What's the full address of the property? city and state as well?
It's 1230 Redwood Road, Saratoga Springs, Utah.
Okay, let me validate that address for you. Okay, so I've got 1230 Redwood Road, Saratoga Springs, zip 84045. Is that right?
Yes.
Perfect. We can get to that area.
Okay, and then obviously in real life you would go ahead and get them booked in with your voice agent. But let's have a look and see what happened in the back end. So we can see that it took the address that we transcribed. So this was the transcription, and we can see that it's then formatted it correctly. So this was transcribed in text, and then it's changed it into numbers. It's then gone ahead and called the address validation API, and it's gone ahead and said, yep, this is a real address, and this is the proper format, including the zip code as well. So you can see that I didn't even tell it the zip code, but because it's gone and matched it with Google Maps, we now have access to the zip code, which is fantastic. We've then gone and just made sure that it's valid. And then we've just plugged those coordinates into our data table so we can use it for the next step, and then it's responded to the agent. Then I've gone ahead and confirmed that yes, that is the correct address. And so it's gone ahead and taken those coordinates. So let's have a look here. So yep, it's taken the coordinates of the address that I provided. It's then gone ahead and plugged it into this code node, and it's then done a bit of math basically, and it said, okay, the distance is 6.4 miles away, which is within the 25-mile radius, and therefore it's in area. And then we can go ahead and get them booked in. Okay, so you can see that worked really nicely, and you can see that on the phone, although we have all of this going on in the background, it actually sounds pretty smooth. So let's go ahead and test the other ways of doing this. So let's say you're working with a company, and instead of a service area, they give you a list of cities that they service. So in this case, we would change this to false, and we would put the city list to true. And then you would basically put the list of cities that they work with in this format, in this service area city list section here. So in this case, the address that I'm using is in Saratoga Springs, which is in the list here. Okay, so let's see how this works. So I'm going to go ahead and save this now, and let's give this another call.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi there. What's the full address of the property? City and state as well?
It's 1230 Redwood Road, Saratoga Springs, Utah.
Okay, let me validate that address for you. Okay, so I've got 1230 Redwood Road, Saratoga Springs, zip 84045. Is that right?
Yes.
Perfect. We can get to that area.
Okay, so same outcome again, but let's have a look into this code node. So you can see that this time we're not using the service area radius, and so we've matched Saratoga Springs to our list which says Saratoga Springs. So nice and simple, but we're just confirming that we are in fact in the right area. So let's test the last option, which is a list of zip codes. Okay, so this time I've set the zip list to true and the other two to false. And then I've just put in a bunch of zip codes, which our address is within those, okay, in this format. And I'm just going to save this. And we're going to test it a little bit here as well, so you'll see what I mean. So let's give this another go.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi there. What's the full address of the property? City and state as well?
It's 1230 Redwood Road, Saratoga Springs.
What state is that in, or what's the zip code?
It's in Utah.
Okay, let me validate the address quickly. So I've got 1230 Redwood Road, Saratoga Springs, zip 84045. Is that right?
Yes.
Perfect. We can get to that area.
Okay, so you can see in the prompt, I've set it up in a way where if they give a partial address, it's just going to ask a really smooth, quick confirming question, and then it still works perfectly. So this time, if we go into the code node, we can see that it's used the zip list match method, and we can see that 84045 matched the one of the options that we put in that variable node. Okay, so this time let's test it with an address that's outside of the service area. Okay, so I've picked this random address in California, which should be way outside of the service area, obviously, if we're working in Utah. So I've gone ahead and set this back to service area, okay, with the same settings as before. So let's see what happens this time.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi there. What's the full address of the property, city and state as well?
It's 742 Evergreen Terrace, San Pablo, California.
Okay, let me validate the address for you. So I've got 742 Evergreen Terrace, San Pablo, zip 94806. Is that right?
Yes.
Unfortunately, it looks like we can't service that area. If you have any other questions or need further assistance, feel free to ask.
Okay, so you can see it successfully determined that that's actually way outside of our service area and that that's someone that we're never going to be able to service, and it's just letting them know. So instead of booking them in, even though the address is way outside of the service area, we actually want to say, let's not book in our calendar with customers that we can't service, and let's just stop it there. Now, obviously, you can adjust the prompt to have it say whatever you want to politely reject them. But if we come into the code node here, we can say we can see that the service area is out of area, and also California is not allowed in the states list. So it has a couple of backups here, even though it's not necessarily linking up directly with the latitude and longitude. It detected that the state was outside of the state list that we've determined here, and so it's rejected that. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. I know that was a little bit technical, but if you're selling voice agents to any home service business where the next step is to book them in for a home visit, you need to have this sort of system that's checking the address, making sure it's a real address, and then making sure that it's within our service area. Okay, it's really, really important. Otherwise, you're going to be booking sales reps into addresses that are way outside the service area or that don't even exist, and they can't find it on the map, and then they need to call the customer back just to confirm their actual address, which we don't want happening. So like I say, everything is in the description, including the NA10 template, the Vapi prompt, the setup for all of the tools as well. So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully that was useful. If so, I will see you in the next one.